So, like I said, we are stepping away from biomes and headed into population growth. So, actually, we'll do this. Population growth. So, we have our definition of a population and all of those population descriptions that we talked about in that first ecology lesson. So we'll start with describing populations. So a population. Anybody remember the definition? Or just a characteristic? Yeah. You got populations and communities switched, which is an easy thing to do. Don't worry. So it is a group of something. You saying something? I can't hear you. Yes, exactly. A population is a group of individuals of the same species. A group of individuals of the same species, and we're going to limit that to a single area. A group of individuals of the same species in an area. I'll make this really big, really quickly. All right. Group of individuals of the same species in an area. If you remember, a species is just a group of individuals that live together and can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. When researchers study populations, they look for the population's geographic ranges. So, where they live, the population densities, so how close they are together, their distribution, so how they are kind of arranged in their space, their growth rate, how fast they are growing or shrinking, and age structure. So all of these things kind of come together to denote how a population is studied. You've got geographic range, density, distribution, growth rate, and age structure. Can you get your mask on, please? Thank you, thank you. All right. So we are going to work our way through each one of these qualities. So by the end of the day, you will be able to use these definitions to describe any population to me. So, or to anybody, it doesn't have to just be me. We are going to start with geographic range. This one's relatively simplistic. The geographic range of a population is just the area inhabited by a population. This is hugely varied. We could talk about the human population in this classroom. We could talk about the human population in the building. We could talk about the human population in the county, in the state, in the country, on the planet. We can go from very, very small to very, very large. For example, if we are studying a bacterial population, the geographic range could literally just be like a rotting pumpkin. We're going to look at this bacterial population, and its entire geographic range is just going to be this one pumpkin. Or if we look at the population of cod, a type of fish in the Western Atlantic, that could stretch from Greenland to North Carolina. So we can go like geographic range can span anywhere from the rotting pumpkin that sits on your porch like 6 weeks after Halloween to the entire Atlantic Ocean. So that's one way we can describe populations. Get this down. Another way scientists or ecologists or even anthropologists can describe populations is through density and distribution. So, how tightly packed a population is and where those certain packs are. Density is the number of individuals per unit area. Number of individuals in an area. And distribution is how the individuals are spaced out. When we talk about distribution, there are three main types of distributions that people talk about. So, there are three types. We're going to note that in three little areas. So, that's going to be an area. That's going to be an area. And that's going to be an area. So, the three types of distribution are random, clumped, and uniform. So, as you may guess, random distribution, if each little dot is an individual, it's just wherever. In uniform distribution, we got individuals that are all kind of lined up. Probably could use bigger dots, but if you've ever been kind of driving down the road and you see one of those like man-made forest areas where all the trees are all lined up, That's an example. So we've got random distribution where the individuals are just kind of scattered out wherever. We've got uniform distribution where everybody's kind of all lined up neatly and organized. And then we have clumped distribution, which is the most common. Where the individuals kind of exist in groups, and those groups are dispersed throughout an environment. Any questions about the different types of density distribution? Okay, so next we're going to move on to age structure. Age structure is another way scientists can classify populations. When looking at a population's age structure, we are looking at the number of males and females of each age in a population. So if we look at an age structure diagram, it'll show us that there are like this many males and this many females who are like under the age of 3, this many males and this many females that are like 3 to 14, this many males and this many females that are 14 to 27, and on and on and on, up until it gets too high for the organism to be alive anymore. This is important because it helps us make predictions about population growth. Because only organisms of a certain age can reproduce. And in animals, usually only the females give rise to offspring. So if you look at an age structure diagram, I'm going to pull one up for you. Just going to make it a little more visual. Look at our age structure diagram. I think I might have shown one of these before. If not, that was a different class. I'm slowly going insane. So we've got ages like 0 to 14, 14 to 46, and 46 plus. Essentially, we've broken it down to pre-reproductive age, reproductive age, and post-reproductive age, which is often the way it's kind of broken down. In this population, it says that it is in rapid growth. That is because there are always going, in this specific population, there are, as the generations are being born, those newer generations are always bigger than the current population. So if this trend were to continue and this were to move up, it would just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which means the next generation is going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. In this diagram, we can see it's slightly larger, but we're not in a period of rapid growth. And here, the number of older people is almost the same as the number of younger people, which means that the population is stable, meaning the people in one generation are having exactly enough kids to replace the people who are dying. So this is really important when studying populations, bless you, to help make predictions about how that population will change over time. That helps us determine growth rate, which is what we're going to talk about next. The growth rate determines whether the size of a population is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. Determines whether a population is increasing, decreasing, or staying the same. You can look at a growth rate and determine whether or not a population will get bigger, get smaller, or remain stable. There are a bunch of factors that affect growth that we're going to talk about. Factors that affect growth. Broken into two groups. The first one is birth rate and death rate. If the birth rate is greater than the death rate, the population will increase. If you get my kind of mathematical shorthand. If the birth rate is smaller than the death rate, the population will decrease. If more people are, or if more organisms are being born than dying, our population is going to get bigger. But if more people are dying than are being born, then our population will decrease. The other kind of factor that can affect growth is immigration and emigration. Immigration and emigration. Immigration is organisms moving in. Emigration is leaving a population. So I always remember it as I immigration in, E immigration exit. If that helps kind of set those straight. So just as birth rate and death rate affect the population, the amount of individuals moving in and moving out will also affect the population. So if birth rates are stable, if immigration is greater than emigration, the population will increase. But if immigration is smaller than emigration, the population will decrease. If more people are moving in or more organisms are moving into a population, then organisms are leaving a population. The population will grow. And if more individuals are leaving a population and then entering a population, it will shrink. From this, we can calculate our growth rate. That is our birth rate plus our immigration minus our death rate plus emigration, or the organisms entering and organisms leaving the population. This is typically reported as individuals per 1,000. So you'll see like 17 individuals per every 1,000 are born. So they take 1,000 individuals, they say, okay, 17 of them had kids. So we're going to say that out of every 1,000, 17 kids were born. And then they'll do that for immigration, emigration, and death rate. And we will get population rate or population growth rate out of 1,000, and then they'll just convert it to a percentage. Now, one last thing, there are two different types of growth. Two types of growth. The first one is exponential. Exponential growth. If growth rates stay the same, and are positive, the size of each individual, or the size of each generation, will be larger than the population before it. So if we start out with 100 bunnies, right, and that grows by 10%, we've got a growth rate of 10%. The next year we'll have 110 bunnies, and then we'll have 115 bunnies, and it'll just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. When this is the case, when our growth rate stays the same, that is when we get exponential growth. Which can be broken down into the larger the population, the faster it grows. This only occurs under ideal conditions with unlimited resources. Only under ideal conditions with unlimited resources. Often in organisms that reproduce rapidly, actually. Here, we'll break it down. So, exponential growth looks a little different in organisms with different reproduction times. So, for example, we've got organisms that reproduce rapidly. For example, one bacteria splits every 20 minutes. So if you start with one bacteria, within 20 minutes it'll be 2. Within 20 minutes it'll be 4. And the next 20 minutes it'll be 8. And that'll just keep growing and growing and growing. And it'll look like this. It'll just shoot straight up. In one day, that one bacteria can become 7, 2. That many. I don't even know how to say it. One bacteria can turn into that many bacteria in one day. So, if you get strep throat, right? You get one of those strep bacteria in the back of your throat. It sees all of those. What is it? Unlimited resources, or what looks like unlimited resources. All the fun sugars in the damp, warm environments. And that splits into 2, into 4, into 8, into 16, into 32. As you keeps growing and growing and growing. So within a day, you go from, my throat's feeling kind of scratchy, to, oh my goodness, I don't want to get up. I cannot go to school today. But exponential growth isn't only in organisms that reproduce rapidly. In organisms that reproduce slowly, they can still get that exponential growth pattern. It just happens over longer periods of time. So an elephant, right? Elephants reproduce every 2 or 3 years, if that. I think the gestation period for an elephant is like almost 2 years. If this happens in an organism, in a new environment, introduced to a new environment, that is when we get an invasive species. Invasive species are introduced into a new environment and they grow rapidly and without control because there's nothing in that environment to control it. You could consider the strep bacteria in your throat from when you get strep throat to be an invasive species. Not supposed to be there. But this can't go on forever. We will not have unlimited resources forever. And that is when we get the second type of growth, logistic growth. Because eventually, exponential growth stops. Logistic growth happens in 3 phases. The first phase is exponential growth. So we've got our exponential growth. Our second phase, that's really light. Our growth slows. So we start getting that little, where the slope kind of flattens out a little bit. And then we have phase 3, where growth stops. Now, just because growth stops doesn't mean that the population is going to die out. It just means that the population is not going to get any bigger or get any smaller. Actually, that's not where we were. So, logistic growth occurs when a population, I'm just going to abbreviate that POP, slows and stops after a period of exponential growth, which is essentially exactly what we just graphed. We had our exponential growth, it stops, and it kind of flattens off. This can happen because birth rates decrease, so organisms slow down the rate that they reproduce at. It can happen because death rates increase. It can happen because immigration decreases or emigration increases. This last definition, I want you to make stand out in your notes. Put a star by it, put fireworks by it, highlight it. We are going to talk about carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the maximum numbers of individuals, the maximum number of individuals that a particular environment can support. That word environment is really key. Carrying capacity depends on the environment. at carrying capacity, a population stabilizes. We'll talk a little bit about how an organism can reach, or a population can reach carrying capacity, how it can kind of flirt with that line a little bit, how that can fluctuate. But if you're asked to point out carrying capacity on a graph, let's say we've got our logistic growth, our carrying capacity. If this is the number of individuals, this is time, this right here is our carrying capacity. Now, it's not always a straight line right here. The population isn't always exactly at carrying capacity when it's up there. It can, like I said, it can kind of dance around that line a little bit. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, so there is an exit ticket on Canvas, so I need to get your Chromebooks out and fill that out for me, please. If you've not turned in your project, get that in as soon as possible, unless you have talked to me otherwise. Just give me 1 second. Stop this.